Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1114 of the Juicebox Podcast. Kayla's daughter had an A1C of over 13 and a blood glucose of over 1,000 when she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Now Zoe is home and inquisitive about what happened to her at the hospital and dreaming of being a nurse. And her mom is on the Juicebox Podcast. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. Drink AG1.com/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the insulin pump that my daughter wears, Omnipod. Learn more and get started today with the Omnipod DASH or the Omnipod 5 at my link, omnipod.com/juicebox. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox.
I am Kayla. I am from the Midwest. I don't know what else you want to know and how you want me to introduce myself.
Well, that you're Kayla is good. That's a good start. Do you have type 1 diabetes, or are you the parent of someone with type 1?
I am the parent of someone with type 1. Do you want me to go over her diagnosis or?
Kayla, you don't have to ask me every time before you talk. It's okay. So how old is it's your daughter?
It is my daughter, my middle child, actually. She was diagnosed January 10th of last year. That was 20 days before her 10th birthday.
2022, right?
2022, yep.
Yeah, okay. And I'm sorry, right before her what birthday?
Right before her 10th birthday.
Okay. And she's your middle. So you have older, younger, how much older, how much younger?
Yep. Her brother is 12 going on 13. And then the youngest will be 9 this fall.
Okay.
So she's literally right there in the middle.
Neither of those kids have diabetes?
No, they do not. Thank goodness. That's been a paranoia of mine ever since she got diagnosed. And
I bet. Yeah. How about other autoimmune issues in your family?
Not with my kids. My husband has an autoimmune disorder. He has psoriasis. In distant family on his side, come to find out, there is a couple of type 1 diabetics, which we did not know about until after our daughter got diagnosed.
Wow. Do you know, like, how far back in his family?
I would say they'd probably 4th cousin to our kids.
Gotcha.
Somewhere in there. So.
Wow. Okay. And how did you find out afterwards? You start asking around with the family?
Yes, we started asking around and stuff with the family and whatnot. And one of them actually reached out to me while she was in the hospital and to offer support and stuff. And if we had any questions and things like that. Her daughter had got diagnosed, I think, a couple years before ours. She's 16 or so now. So she would have been diagnosed as a teenager.
Yeah. No one ever comes up to you prior and says, hey, before you make a bunch of kids, we just wanted to let you know.
No, they don't.
Yeah. No. Everybody's like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I don't know what that means, but okay. So, well, that's interesting. So you had somebody reach out who I'm assuming you're not like very close to, right?
No, it's, the ones that reach out, we see them at, the twice a year family dinners type of thing. Mm-hmm. So
was that helpful hearing from someone?
It was. She offered a lot of support, and I actually did reach out to her when I was setting up my daughter's Dexcom for the first time. She helped me over the phone with that and whatnot. So yeah, she's been pretty helpful.
Nice. Well, that's great. Okay. So how did because this was obviously a surprise to your family.
Yes.
How did it present?
looking back prior to her diagnosis, there were signs that, you just don't really correlate with, you never really think your kid's going to have type 1 diabetes. But right before she got diagnosed, so that Saturday, she played point in a basketball tournament. She had a couple games, and I helped coach, and she kept coming up to me and say, hey, I seem extra thirsty. And I'm like, oh, well, you're just playing a hard game. Just drink some more water. You'll be fine. Mm-hmm. And that sounds terrible. And then I remember her hair being staticky, and I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it, but I just remember her hair being extra staticky. And then that Sunday, she started vomiting and stuff. And then I was like, oh, it's just the stomach flu at that point. You still don't register the type 1 diabetes aspect.
Sure. Yeah, no, there'd be no reason to.
Yeah. And then that night, she the vomiting got progressively worse and more like forceful. And so we did the whole liquids and all of that. She just wasn't keeping anything down. And I told myself in the morning, if she still wasn't getting any better, I would take her in. Well, we ended up falling asleep for a little bit and woke up I think it was about 6 a.m. She fell going to the bathroom, and her face she woke up, her face was sunken in. And I was like, well, this is not a normal flu. Yeah. And then she asked me, so she fell going to the bathroom, and my son was going over to school, so that was fine. I think my youngest was home. My youngest was homesick, and I can't for the life of me remember why. I think it was a cold or something. At that point, there's some details that you just don't remember. So I remember calling my mom to come get my youngest, and my daughter looked at me and asked me, and she must have felt different. She looked at me and she asked me, she goes, am I going to live? And I was like, oh crap, that gets you,
Wow, really?
And she did. So it must have felt different to her too.
Kayla, not ironically, or she wasn't trying to be funny or anything. She had a real concern for herself.
No, yeah, because all of my kids can usually handle sicknesses like champs.
Wow.
And so I've always wondered if it felt different to her somehow. And so we took her into the emergency room, and within 5 minutes, that nurse was like, has she ever had any blood sugar issues? And I said, no. He took her blood sugar, and she maxed out their thing. I mean, he couldn't even get a number. He said she has diabetes. My husband was at work, and of course I call him, and he came. And so her actual stats at diagnosis, she had an A1C of 13.2, and her blood sugar was 1,121.
Holy hell.
Her ketones were slightly above 6. She got transported via ambulance down to Children's Mercy in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. She was in the PICU for overnight there and stuff. They slowly brought her blood sugars down. And, we got to go home Thursday evening. So she went in there Monday. We got to go home Thursday evening. Wow. It was just a whirlwind after that. That 4 days you're learning, they throw these binders at you and say, here's a 4-hour crash course on type 1 diabetes, and mm-hmm. It was just crazy.
You know what? I just talked today to a doctor. I'm going to do a speaking event later this year. And I was speaking to a doctor at a hospital where it's going to be at. And we talked about that very thing, about how impossible it really is to hear what's being said to you in a moment like that. And maybe you even hear it and you're nodding along with it, but you can't recall it later. You know what I mean? It's the worst. It's the worst situation because they have to tell you something. And at the same time, you're going to have very little ability to recollect it when you need it later. Well, and she was right, huh? To ask, am I going to live?
She was. Yeah. And, when she woke up the next morning, I just looked at her. I knew something was different. And then her to ask me that just kind of verified what I was feeling in that moment too. And it was not good. And then of course, at that point we went down to Casey with her and stayed there. And my mom kept my other 2 kids, and they were worried, and, so you have everybody worried, and it's just,
what's insane.
And then, before we leave the hospital, we're like, how do we know if we're doing this right? And they're like, oh, well, if you're not doing it right, you'll be back here and she'll be in DK again. Oh. That's comforting. Thank you.
Which Kansas City was this? Isn't there 2?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
But, honestly, they were great. The nutritionist, the diabetes nutritionist or whatever, the one that gave us the 4-hour course, she was great. And my daughter wants to be a nurse when she gets older. She's always been adamant about that. So she was even asking them questions and things like that. What are you doing and all of that. So I'm a note taker. Even then when I listen to your podcast, I have a notebook. I'm a note taker. And so luckily we've never been back in the hospital yet. But, you leave the hospital with this information and stuff. And then you start listening to your podcast and, you leave the hospital with a target blood sugar of 150, and then you listen to these podcasts and stuff, and you're like, 150 is not okay.
Yeah.
And so I've been more strict with things like that after I started listening to your podcast and stuff.
Cool.
And
well, I'm glad.
It's just, because I remember, so she got released Thursday. I used Friday to kind of get everything gathered and whatnot. And then I was dealing with some things on the family side, back home that I probably can't discuss. But and then she went back to school that following Monday because she's very adamant about school and sports and her extracurriculars. And so that Friday, I had already set up a 504 meeting and everything with the school. But that Monday, you're still clueless because she's had diabetes that about for a week. Yeah. And so I drop her off at school and her blood sugar's sitting at 383. I'm like, this can't be okay. I'm like, do I give more insulin or what do I do? But thankfully we got everything ironed out and stuff. And I've learned a lot listening to these podcasts. And honestly, I've probably managed it off of more of this than what the doctors even tell me. I go into endo appointments and he's like, do you have any questions? And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, I'm looking at our charts and everything. He goes, I have nothing because I really have nothing to say to you. So
can I have my $40 back then, please?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I'm just like, why am I here then every 4 months? But
if you're not going to offer anything, I would like to suggest you just send me the prescriptions and I'll take care of the rest. That's
yes.
No, it's great that you found a rhythm already in a year. Did she adjust well to it, or what was the first couple of months like for her?
She jumped right back into things. So like I said, she went back to school that following Monday. And then she went back to basketball 2 weeks after diagnosis. And then, and we were already on the Dexcom like a week in. So that made me feel more comfortable with things like that. She already went back to math team, her Stuco meetings, because she was Stuco secretary at that time. She went back to attending the youth group every other Wednesday night. We also had her birthday party January 30th, and she was gathered around her table with her friends, letting them practice taking her blood sugar. Mm-hmm. And and she gives herself her shots and stuff. And so I think she adjusted well. I mean, I noticed towards the end of this school year, she got significantly more stressed out with having to leave the classroom to take corrections when needed because she doesn't like to do her shots in front of anybody.
Okay.
So we did have kind of an issue with that. She's so afraid on missing out on something. And so that's kind of an issue that I think we're still probably going to be working into in the next school year, to be honest, because she won't do a pump. She tried the Omnipod, doesn't like the bulkiness of it. And we haven't tried the T-Slim, but if she doesn't like the bulkiness of the Omnipod, she's not going to like the T-Slim. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, if she's willing to do all the injections, I don't see what the problem is. What's the thing that happens at school? You say she doesn't want to miss out, or she doesn't like doing it around people?
She doesn't. Both of them. She doesn't like taking the shots in front of other students, and she doesn't like leaving the classroom because she's afraid she's going to miss out on instruction or something.
I see.
So that's when she has to take a correction. That's almost kind of an issue. I notice she'll kind of ignore my texts for a little while because we text in school and stuff. I've got the nurse on our message thread, and so we all kind of are on the same thread, so we're all in communication and stuff. And so
how does that manifest? How does that manifest as an issue? Does she ignore texts? Does she just slow walk going to the nurse, or how does that happen?
She doesn't ignore them. Essentially, she'll eventually message me back I know she doesn't ever ignore low.
Mm-hmm.
But when she starts to run a little bit high, and see, I've got our Dexcom alert set from 75 to 140.
Mm-hmm.
And if she starts to run a little bit high, I'll message her, you need to take a correction, and I'll let it go for a little while, depending on how high she's getting. But there's been a couple of times where I've had to call the school and say, hey, can you go pull Zoe? But then she'll typically message me. If she's in the middle of a test or something, I'll kind of let it slide for a little bit. But usually she tries to finish what she's doing before she'll leave the classroom to correct.
Yeah.
And I've told her, I said, that's okay sometimes. I said, but sometimes it's not. And she's going into the middle school next year, which is our elementary and middle school is separated. And so I don't know if it's going to be more of an issue or less of an issue going into next year. It's going to be a whole new ballgame, essentially.
Yeah. And in that scenario, like, She wasn't comforted by the idea of pushing a button on her pump and not having to leave the room?
She was, and we've talked about it. And I had almost got her convinced to try the Omnipod again this summer simply because so she wouldn't feel like she had to leave the classroom and stuff.
Right.
And she just, I don't know what it is. She just doesn't want that other thing on her body.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's fair enough, I'm sure she'll, if she, decides differently, I'm sure she'll let you know.
Yeah, but see, when she's at friends' houses or grandparents or something, I mean, she does it all without complaining. It's just school. She does not like to leave the classroom.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I would have given anything to leave my classroom. Any excuse at all.
She is very particular about trying to get those straight A's, and yeah.
Well, very nice. Good for her. All right. Well, then, I mean, and it's not that big of an issue. I would imagine it sounds like her management's going well, right?
Yeah, it's going well. So a month after her diagnosis, so by her first appointment, we went to her appointment with her endo 3 months after diagnosis. He was like, he goes, I'm sure, because I don't think you probably have experienced illness and stuff yet. And I was like, oh, heck, 1 month after diagnosis, I said, all 3 of our kids went through influenza A, the stomach flu, and upper respiratory.
Jeez.
All within a month. So I was like, we've got that down pat.
Yeah.
Like, I know influenza A and upper respiratories, her ketones tend to run higher. She needs more insulin. Stomach flu, she needs less. And I'm like, we've got it down.
Yeah. Little trial by fire. You got a little bit of everything there in the beginning.
Yes, we did.
How about a honeymoon? Was there any honeymoon to speak of? I mean, it doesn't sound like it with what her blood sugar was when you found out, but
I still don't know. And I've asked myself that, a few times, like, is she honeymooning? Or I honestly still can't tell you if she ever honeymooned, because I don't ever feel like there's been a flipping point where she's required more or not.
Right.
Because she's still just she left the hospital on 9 units of insulin a day for her Basaglar, and she's still only on 14 units, and it's fluctuated a little bit.
Yeah.
But not a lot.
She's 10. She doesn't get her period yet, I imagine?
No.
Nope,
and I'm not looking forward to that.
No, trust me, there's a number of reasons you wouldn't want to look forward to that. Some of them you've lived through and are aware of. Yeah. She looks just like you, by the way. I'm sorry to stalk you online, but you and she look so similar. It's really something. Do you see that?
Yeah, I personally think she looks more like her dad, but I do get told a lot that she looks like me. So
your son looks like your husband, and the little one's a mix.
He acts like him too, but we will stay out of that.
The little one seems like a mix, but your daughter that we're talking about, I mean, she's got your nose and your eyes and your mouth and like everything. So
yeah,
that's crazy.
Yep.
Very cool. Is that your husband's hair color that they have?
So no, his is more of like a dirty blonde. And so back when I was pregnant with my son, he got reconnected with his biological father, and we walked into that family reunion and there were redheads everywhere.
Oh.
And I looked at him, I was like, oh no. And not that there's anything wrong with redheads, but I never suspected that we would have a redheaded child. And I know there's redheads on my side of the family, but I ended up with 2 redheads. Yeah. So
well, they're adorable. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
So what makes you want to come on the podcast? What made you reach out?
So basically the podcast has just helped me a lot and whatnot. And I just wanted to reach out and let you guys know that and stuff. And It's really honestly, like, even her illnesses in her first month after diagnosis, I mean, I specifically looked for episodes on illness in your podcast and listened to them.
Well, you're a good person to ask, Kayla. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, you're fine.
Yeah, we do this thing in the Facebook group, right? People ask questions, and there's a group experts in the Facebook group, which means these are people who are interested in helping and have an understanding of like what's inside of the podcast. When there's so many episodes, it's kind of hard to keep all straight. And they come in and they answer questions. Like, people say, like, I have a question about this. And they'll say, there's an episode about that right here. And so you were doing that. You're using the podcast when you have questions. I'm very interested in how that worked for you. Like, did you go online, dig them up? Did you ask on Facebook? And how do you find them? And then how did you put them into practice? In 2015, I needed support to start making this podcast. and Omnipod was there. They bought my first ad. In a year when the entire podcast got as many downloads as it probably got today, Omnipod was there to support the show, and they have been every year for 9 seasons. I want to thank them very much, and I want to ask you to check them out at omnipod.com/juicebox. If you'd like to wear the same insulin pump that Arden does, all you have to do is go to omnipod.com/juicebox. That's it. Head over now and get started today, and you'll be wearing the same tubeless insulin pump that Arden has been wearing since she was 4 years old.
So I would just go on the Juicebox Podcast, the Facebook group, and hit search, and I would type in like a keynote of what I wanted to search. I would just go and start going through the threads and finding an episode, and I would go to the episode and listen to it. So I knew there was one day a birthday party was coming up with like a bounce house and cake and all of that. I was like, I'm going to go find an episode on like jumping and things like that. And so I actually listened to like the trampoline episode, the variable, and I applied that to the bounce house. And I've listened to all the variable kind of episodes, and because we do a lot of like hiking and stuff on vacations, and I've noticed even with sunburns, she spikes a little bit. When we vacationed, I've got family back in Wyoming. When we went out that way, and it's a little bit of a higher altitude, I noticed her diabetes actually did supremely wonderful on vacation. And I don't know what it was. I can't tell you. But I noticed the best time that her diabetes acted was when we were up in the mountains at my uncle's cabin. She even ate full-fledged spaghetti, and I was like, she is going to spike, and she was wonderful. So like, I don't know if that's got anything to do with anything, but
yeah. At elevations, people report needing less insulin. So if you had great outcomes, my guess would be that she was getting more efficacy out of the insulin she had going, which might indicate that what she has when you're home might not be quite enough. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think
I never thought of it that way, but yeah.
That's why I'm here, Kayla. You tell the story, and then I think of it a different way. It's the whole podcast. You understand.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, so that would be
She did great on vacation. So yeah, that makes sense actually.
Was she? And I don't, because my first guess would have been, had you not mentioned the elevation, my first guess would have been, well, maybe she was more active on vacation, but she plays basketball, so she already is pretty active. So that's what made me go past that and think about the elevation instead.
Yeah, because she plays basketball, soccer, and all of that. So
yeah, so it's not a lack of hydration. It's not a lack of running around. She's doing those things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my thought would be, if at elevations you get more bang for your buck from your insulin, because what you usually hear is that people who live at elevation use less insulin, but in that case, then what you learned was your insulin was more powerful, but you weren't having lows, you were having better outcomes. So then I think, well, maybe some of your settings need to be adjusted.
I never thought of that.
That's how my brain works on that one. Anyway, let's get back to how great the podcast is. So,
oh gosh,
being I'm going to get incredibly serious here for a second. I apologize up front, because you just got done working, right? You worked like a full day. Now you're doing this in your car.
Yes, I work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you very much sitting in your car after work and making a podcast with me. I am not having a great week. My mom has passed away. And,
oh, no.
And please, it's not why I'm telling you that. I'm telling you because I've not had a great week. And I didn't record a whole lot this week, only when I needed to. And just to hear somebody talk about this thing that I made and how it was like accessible and valuable, it made me feel good, and I haven't felt good in a couple of days. So I appreciate that very much.
Well, that's good, because I've even reached out. So I used to work with this guy, and their kid was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes actually a couple months before Zoe. And I reached out to her, and I was like, hey, there's this wonderful, I don't know if she listens or not. It's like, but hey, there's this wonderful podcast and stuff. And, I went into not my first endo appointment, but my second endo appointment. And I did have some issues with the school, which I can get into that a little bit later. Mm-hmm. But I went into that endo appointment, and I said, hey, I'm like, this is what I need on my papers to give the school. I said, I want corrections above, because I think that point they were still saying don't correct until you're, oh my gosh, I want to say it was like 175 or something like that. I was like, I want corrections on the paper. I want to state above 140. And I said, I want it to state this and this, because according to those papers, it was like, give 15 grams of sugar for a low. Well, obviously 15 grams is way too much in most cases, to be honest.
Right.
And so the school is wanting to give her so many, like 10, 15 Skittles, and that would shoot her to the stratosphere. And so, I mean, I literally, probably about every concept I apply, I have learned from the podcast versus the doctor's office.
Oh,
so
thank you. That's really great.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I needed that. That's good. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. So I felt weird about. Oh, I'm sorry. You have something else to say? Go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Oh.
I was even going to say. So she ended up toward the end of last year. She ended up having to go to KU. It's in Kansas City as well.
Mm-hmm.
To get. She had a, can't remember what it's called. Hemangioma. Might have to correct me if I'm wrong, but she had a tumor of blood vessels in her hand. And so when we went to the doctor here where I'm from first, it's a smaller town. He's like, he goes, I can't tell you what that mass in her hand is. He goes, I'm going to send you on to a specialist. Well, that's when we got transferred to KU. But Zoe was sitting there and he said, they'll want to make sure it's not, double check and see if it's cancerous and stuff like that. Well, we're walking out and my Dexcom starts beeping and she's angled up. And I could tell she was stressed about what the doctor said. We get in the van and she starts crying. I'm like, he should not have said cancerous in front of her.
Right.
But it turned out she just got sclerotherapy. It wasn't cancerous or anything like that. And she's all good now. But so that was my first, they kind of put her to sleep for it and everything. KU was great about it too. She's not the only type 1 diabetic they've dealt with, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So that's clear and good. But I actually, you've got an episode on something about emergency room visits and kind of things like that. I listened to that before I specifically went into that appointment.
I love you. You're the best, Kayla. Thank you. By the way, everyone listening should listen to the podcast the way Kayla does. It's, by the way, also, I thought you said Chuck Mangione a minute ago, and I was like, that can't be right.
Hemangioma. It's like a tumor of blood vessels.
Okay.
So what they did was they just went and they injected her with this huge needle of stuff to basically shrink the blood vessels in her tumor. Sounds really weird and kind of gross, but
no, it's amazing.
But she did great, and KU gave me updates every so often of her blood sugar while she was put to sleep and things like that. So. And then actually while I was sitting in the waiting room for that, because I switched jobs too. I worked in insurance before this, what I do now. And so I'm sitting there in the waiting room, still paranoid about her, but still comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And my new boss is like, he goes, I need a picture of your driver's license and stuff like that to get you started. And I'm like, okay, crud, I just had a lot going on. And so I started a new job and all of that as well. So
I'm just fascinated that I know who Chuck Mangione is, but I don't know any of his music. How is that possible? How would I know a person's name but not their work? Is that a name you know?
It's not.
It's not? No, you live in the middle of the country. I don't know what gets to you people. You can't eat seafood there, right? Like it has to be.
We do have seafood.
No, where would you get it from? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's too far from the coasts.
At the restaurant or the store. I'm sure it's not fresh.
Yeah.
I don't eat seafood. I can't stand seafood. My husband loves it.
I'm going to guess it's because you've been buying it in the middle of the country. You really should just go west or east and then get some for yourself. Anyway, I'm just not sure what makes it to you is what I'm saying.
The only seafood I've ever tried is fishing at a farm pond and, skinning crappie and frying it up.
No. I don't mean like fish out of a pond. No. What is this?
My husband likes crab and all of that.
Yeah. We got to get you guys to a coast. Okay. Is there, I know how everybody works. All we need is a basketball tournament in Maryland and you'll be all set. And if I said, go to Maryland, have some seafood, you'd say, I can't do that. I can't afford it. And if I said, there's a basketball tournament for your daughter, you'd be like, oh yeah, we should definitely go. I've been to some places because of baseball. And I get there and I'm just like, where the hell are we? Like, where are we? Why are we here? Why are we doing this? Oh my God.
Yes, I feel that. We live in a small town. And so we have to travel a lot for, my son's in football, basketball, and track. My daughter this upcoming year, she'll have more sports opportunities. So she's already had basketball and volleyball camp this summer. she'll be in soccer and all of that. So we actually have to travel quite a ways. I remember leaving work at 5 o'clock and making it to his track meet, like right as he's running his last event or something.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're over an hour away just to go to these sports events. Like, how? This is crazy.
I'm gonna give everybody a great piece of advice. Give me 2 minutes, okay? If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen. My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information.
Okay.
And if your kid's already older, you probably got ripped off like this and you don't know it. So one year we're told we have to go to Atlanta, yes. And there's a baseball tournament there and you have to go there because all the college scouts are going to be there and blah, 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 blah. And you have to use this specific hotel. So we all go to the hotel, which I'm going to tell you seemed really overpriced for what it was. And it was dirty, like to the point where when Cole and I got there, the first thing we did before we unpacked was went back out and bought cleaning supplies and came back and we cleaned the bathroom ourselves before we even unpacked our clothes. Like that was the condition of the room. And these are like, we're 2 boys, you know what I mean? Like, and we're like, I'm not getting in that tub. So that's the level of the room. And then the next year we head back and they tell us again, we have to go to this hotel. It's for team unity, they said. And I was like, this is bullshit. So I looked into it more. And what I learned was that the baseball team was getting a cut of the hotel rooms. So they forced us to go to the same place so that they could get a cut. And then they would say, if you don't use that hotel, your kids might not play. Like they literally strong-armed you like that. So we went down there and Cole and I went to this much nicer hotel for less money. Cole played, by the way. That wasn't a problem. It was all BS. And I'm going to count on my fingers. I apologize. 17, 18, 19, 20, 22. 7 years later, my son ends up moving to Atlanta for a job. And we go to visit him. I randomly pick a hotel online. And I walk in and I go, oh, this is the hotel that Cole and I went to the second year when we refused to go to the crappy hotel. It was just such a weird moment. Like I walked into the lobby and I was like, I've been here before. And then I had this whole like baseball memory thing. And then it made me think of how they ripped us off for the hotel room, which is why you're now getting told that story. So anyway, they're always full of crap. Don't worry. And I'll go over it again. You're either a player or a check. If you don't know which one you are, you're a check. Okay?
Yep.
That's it. 100%. Don't ever like go with your gut constantly. If you think we're being taken advantage of, you are being taken advantage of. So
yeah, agreed.
That's it. Anyway, basketball, huh? Is she going to be tall enough? Can we get some college money out of this, or is this just a fun thing?
No, I think this is just a fun thing. She's always had her heart set on becoming a nurse, and then she wants to do like sewing and stuff on the side.
Nice.
It sounds really odd, but
not at all.
She loves painting and stuff too. She's actually a really good artist, which I've got a picture. Obviously, I can't show you right now. Maybe I can send it to you or something. But she's got this picture she's painted that looks really good. But yeah, she's always been adamant about she wants to be a nurse, and she's sticking to her guns on that so far. So I guess we'll see what happens in the future. But
I was pretty sure my daughter was going to be a pre-law student, and instead she's in art school. So you never know what happens, I guess.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah. No, it's delightful. Good for her. Yeah. And by the way, it doesn't mean she couldn't play a little softball in college. And even like,
no.
don't disregard like a nice D3 where a shorter white girl could get on the court a little bit and still make a little money for school. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell her get out there, make some money.
I keep telling her, 'cause she just played elementary basketball. She's just going into middle school. I keep telling her, I'm like, you need to be more aggressive. Don't be afraid to, get in there and just get at it. I remember playing basketball back in 8th grade and I had a girl pulling my hair. I'm not telling you to pull anybody's hair, but
definitely elbow her in the side.
Girl.
Yeah. Definitely give her a little bit in the side when she goes for the ball. It'll slow her down next time.
She's too nice, and I just think that's where she's not going to succeed in sports.
I honestly, it's like 2 more years, and then that all goes away. Like, I know, like, the girls were still worried about each other back then. Like, I watched it too with Arden. Arden played a lot of softball as a young person, and when they were younger, somebody would, like, I don't know, like, not get hurt badly, but something would happen and all the girls would almost stop, like a bunch of little moms. They're like, "Are you all right?" And then they hit a certain age. And when that happened, they were like, "Keep going. She's hurt." So it goes away pretty quickly. That nice thing. Although I'm waiting for it to come back with Kelly. I think it will one day.
Gosh.
She's almost 50, but I think she's going to nice back up anytime now. What do you think? Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't think so, Kayla?
I don't know. Now, my youngest, I wouldn't have to worry about her, being aggressive in sports. She's like a mixture of it all. I don't even know what she is yet, to be honest.
Nice. So tell me a little bit about your goals. So I know where your range is, which is terrific that you're keeping on the CGM. By the way, using a Dexcom or a Libre?
Dexcom G6. She actually tried the G7, but she kept losing data signal. She's got a habit of leaving her phone in like one room and trying to go throughout the house. Well, her range isn't as far with the G7.
Right.
So she went back to the G6 for the moment. I mean, yeah. I told her, I said, eventually I'm pretty sure they're probably going to stop producing the G6. So you're going to have to do the G7.
At some point, I would imagine. But I don't think right away. I mean, obviously they have business arrangements with a lot of these, like with Tandem and Omnipod. But Tandem and Omnipod are like, this will be a little incongruous with actual time, but you're starting to see them talk about G7 for Omnipod 5, G7 for Control IQ. Like, they're obviously working on it and getting pretty close to bringing it out. I have to tell you, Arden's been using G7 for a couple of months now, and I haven't seen any disconnects. Like, so I don't know if that just means that Arden is like tied to her phone differently, but I haven't had a problem with it. And she's been at college and home while she's using it so far. And I haven't seen anything like that. So I don't know, like, how it goes. I also don't know that they don't fine tune them a little bit after they're out in the world. Like, this is my supposition. I don't know anything. But I think sometimes once they get out in the world, devices, not just saying CGMs, and they see, they get the return data on what's happening, they do have the ability to adjust them a little bit. So I always think that too. Maybe, it's coming.
Yeah, and she actually mentioned that. She goes, I think I might want to wait a few months to try it again and see if they make any changes. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's much smaller, super easy to put on. Like, the warm-up period thing is, 30 minutes? And sometimes it doesn't even last 30 minutes. I don't know if you got to use it enough to do the overlapping, but that's amazing. I told Arden about that up front, and she's like, I'm not doing that. Everything I tell her, she says she's not doing, by the way, in case you're wondering what you're in for in the next 10 years. But now that she's home, I'm like, look, just try it. I'm like, the G7 is going to run out in like 6 hours. Like, put the other one on now and just leave it on for a couple of hours. And then whenever you think about it, just go in the app and switch it over and then tear the old one off and throw it away. There's no warm up because the warm up happened while you were still getting data from the old one. And it's also soaked in a little bit, so it's more accurate when you turn it on. It's fantastic. Like, what a great little improvement, Really cool, actually. So she'll get there. She thought a pump was too bulky, or she didn't want to wear two things?
She thought the Omnipod was too bulky.
Okay.
And she's had a couple instances where the Dexcom has ripped off. So one time her and her brother were actually resting around in the front yard and he accidentally ripped it off, which it hasn't hurt her when it's ripped off, I guess. Yeah. But she roughhouses a lot. So, and I don't know if that's part of it.
Maybe. And it's new to her as well. I mean, honestly, at some point when you show her, if you put this on and this on, it's going to make decisions about your insulin for you. And we're not going to, like, we won't, when your blood sugar starts going up, the pump will bring it back down again. Boy, that might change her mind a little bit too.
And I predict, going into this school year where she's at a lot more sporting events, without me and things like that, I predict that she'll eventually come to a point where she's going to come to me and say, hey, I want to do the pump.
Yeah.
Because she's going to realize it's a lot easier when she's out at those games and things like that and practices and stuff to manage with the pump versus, the shots.
Still, nothing wrong with it happening in her time. Let her come to it on her own. I think it'll be easier in general if it's a decision she makes for herself.
She's taught her friends how to give her shots. Her brother and sister, she taught how to give her shots.
Nice. Wow. I was
like, you're more brave than I am.
Oh, you just don't think there's some people you wouldn't let stick you with a needle?
There's no way in heck I would let my 8-year-old child shove me with a needle. So she is a lot more brave than I am.
Or she just hasn't been through enough to know not to trust those kids yet. It's funny. Oh, that's very cool. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nope, you're fine. I was going to say, I remember the first time she stayed the night anywhere, because she's usually the kid where her and her friends, during the summer, they're always at each other's houses. And so the first time she ever stayed the night, so that summer, she really didn't stay the night much of anywhere, which I think probably got to her a little bit. So the first time she actually did stay the night was at her friend's house, who doesn't go to our school anymore. She's goes to a different school now with the family that they live with. She stayed the night there, and I trust this couple. They've got a ton of kids, plus they're raising these other 3 kids now. Both their parents died in car crashes a year apart.
Wow.
My daughter was really close to that family, and so those were terrible funerals, and that was just a terrible time.
Yeah.
Her friend was in the accident as well, and there was one point all we knew was that she had a brain bleed, and they ended up messaging and FaceTiming every day while she was in the hospital, and that friend did the same for her when Zoe was in the hospital, and it's just been a lot. I remember I went to pick up Zoe the next morning, and she actually called me. So Zoe started beeping low it was about 3 a.m. And I waited. I told myself, I was like, I'm going to wait 5 minutes and then see. Well, she ended up, she texted me. She goes, I'm on my way to her now. She goes, I've got this. I was like, okay, perfect, And she straightens Zoe out and everything. And the next morning I go to pick Zoe up, and she had corrected Zoe with an applesauce pouch, because Zoe is a very hard sleeper. I tell her to open her mouth, and all I do is squirt some stuff in her mouth, and she swallows. It sounds terrible. And I'm like, you need to learn how to wake up when you move out, which is going to be a while, but, and she's like, I went to take Zoe's blood sugar to see what she actually was. And she goes, I couldn't get any blood to come out. She goes, so I'm squeezing on her finger. And then she's like, I finally just said, screw it, and just went to go open the applesauce pouch. I put some in her mouth. And she goes, then some squirted all over her arm. She goes, by that point, Zoe just shot up and woke up. And she goes, I had Zoe do it on her own. She goes, I don't know how you do it.
Well, to alleviate one of your possible concerns, the only thing I was worried about when Arden left for college was that she wouldn't get up in the middle of the night if she needed to. And I was like really concerned, and it was never a problem.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Like, once she knew it was her job to do, she just did it. And to show that it's a semi-conscious decision that she made, when she comes home for a break, she gets home, and the first thing she says to me is like, you're going to have to like wake up in the middle of the night if I get low. Like I'm home to rest. Like I'm here to sleep. I'm not here to I'm not taking care of myself in the middle of the night again. So it's, and I'm not going to tell you there weren't a handful of times where I didn't have to wake her up. Like, there were, but there were more times where I would text and say like, hey, I don't know if you see you're low. And she goes, oh, I took care of it already. Like, and it was like 3-4 o'clock in the morning a couple of times. So she was getting up and taking care of herself. And it was really kind of heartwarming. And at the same time, if I'm being completely honest and telling a full picture, I also felt bad, because what it feels like to me is that she made that the same decision that we all make, as parents. Like, I'm not going to sleep as well because of this, and I'm just going to be okay with that. So I feel bad that that she had to do that, and that obviously that's going to be her life. But I mean, I don't want to say it is what it is, but there's no getting around it. So, anyway.
Yeah, and that's one of my worries when she gets older, and obviously it's inevitable she's going to move out, and so that's always been in the back of my mind. And there's other things when your kids get older too that are in the back of your mind on how it's going to affect their future and all of that. But
Sure. Yeah.
I try and not dwell on it anymore.
It's good advice.
But I'm like, we're just learning to live with it. And honestly, it hasn't held her back at all, except there was one instance after volleyball camp just a few weeks ago. All of the girls up and decided to go to one of the grandparents' house to have a pool party. Well, I was at work, and so my mom was supposed to go get her from volleyball camp and stuff. And I didn't find out anything about this until I went to pick her up from my parents' house, after work and everything. And then she immediately breaks down and starts crying. And I was like, what's the matter? Then she comes out and tells me that all the girls decided to do a swim party at her grandparents' house. And for one, she's like, I didn't have my swimsuit with me. And I was like, well, we would have figured that out. I'm like, I'm sure grandma's got some, and then she goes, I didn't think you'd let me go. I said, what? And she goes, I didn't think you'd let me go. And at that point I was like, I'm like, grandma and I would have figured it out for you to go, honey. Yeah. It's like, I don't want you to ever feel like you can't go participate in those things just, because of your diabetes. I said, that's not the case. Mm-hmm. And that's the first time she was ever approached with a situation like that, where it's been a spur of the moment type of thing.
Yeah.
So she was actually really upset about that. She was the only volleyball girl that didn't go. And I said, that stuff comes up in the future. I said, message me or grandma. I said, we will figure it out. I said, diabetes should not hold you back from that.
And has it happened again? Has she handled it differently?
Nothing has happened again since. And I think after I told her that, she was better and everything.
Right.
But part of me has that mom guilt too. Like, what have I done to make my daughter feel like I would say no?
Oh no, I was going to say that's where I was headed next, Kayla. Like, but it's not that you should feel like, oh, what have I done that made her think that? I just thought, but that is in the back of her mind. Like when that came up and everybody else is like, oh yeah. She's thinking, oh, I have diabetes. We're not ready for that. We're not prepared. I probably can't do it. And I know it's an unbearable thing, like as a parent, to watch happen. I listen, the other night, Arden had her period and her blood sugars were like difficult, and somebody got food, and I know she was hungry, and somebody said, hey, I'm going to order, I forget what they were ordering, something. And Arden's like, no, I'm okay. But I knew she was hungry. And so I said, are you just not eating because of your blood sugar? And she's like, yeah, she's like, my blood sugar's too high. I can't eat right now. And I was like, okay. I said, well, we could push it really hard and, order some food and just, bring it in. And then she was just like, no, it's okay. But that's not what she meant. She didn't mean it was okay. She meant, no, sucks. And I don't want to think about it. So I know what you mean. It sucks,
Yeah. And I ran into that situation with her a few times too. And one was actually, she wasn't high or anything. She's actually running really great numbers. I was at a birthday party yesterday. And I mean, there was cupcakes and whatnot. And I asked her, I said, Zoe, are we dosing for a cupcake? And she goes, no. She goes, I don't want one. About 10 minutes passed. And I was like, I'm not trying to pressure you as a diabetic to eat a cupcake. I said, but I see the look you're giving these cupcakes. I said, are we dosing for a cupcake? She's like, no, I'll be fine. I was like, that's
again,
like,
not
what
the
about
question.
half?
Yeah,
I'm like, that's not, I'm like, I can tell that's not the answer you're wanting to give me. Mm-hmm. And I said, what about half of a cupcake? I said, again, I'm not pressuring you. And she goes, I said, if you want, I said, we can just I was like, I told her, I said, if you want, we can just do a crap ton of insulin right now. And said, and as you start to go down, you can nibble on your cupcake. She's like, yeah, we'll do that. So I pushed, I think it was like 3.5 units of insulin with what her ratios are.
Right.
And as she started to go low, she's playing outside too. I mean, they've got like a ditch with some woods on the back of their property that my kids go play in. And so she's down there playing everything. And then I'd message her and like, all right, you're angled down now, come up and have a few bites. So she'd come up, have a few bites, she'd level out, and then she'd go play again. And I mean, it taken, 45 minutes to an hour to eat her whole cupcake, but eventually she did. And her numbers ran perfectly. But so I could tell she wanted that cupcake. She just didn't want to end up going high or anything. I'm like, there's ways we can do this so you don't go high. You just may not be able to shove it on your mouth like these other kids are.
These monsters that are just like, whoa, and then running away. You know, and better to eat it, honestly, better to eat it a little more slowly to begin with, right? Like,
yeah,
we all should probably be doing that. So, oh, good. I'm glad she didn't just keep saying no. It's good to know that she's like, oh, I'll work with this. And it was nice of you to stick with it too, and to notice how she felt, and not to just go, okay, she doesn't want it, and then never think about it again. Look at you. You're a good mom, Kayla.
Yeah, I try.
Yeah.
Sometimes the kids try my patience, but I do try.
Well, there's a ditch behind your friend's house you can push them into if there's a problem.
You know, if I would have seen this board to begin with, I think there was like an old flimsy 2x4 that was laying across a ditch to connect two properties. And the kids would cross that all the time. And my husband's friend, the one that lives on the property, he's like, I built them an actual bridge, so they wouldn't have to cross that 2x4. And then I saw the board. I'm like, if I would have known they were crossing that, I'm like, they would never been allowed to cross that to begin with. I'm like, they're lucky nobody ended up hurt.
There's a creek that ran behind where I lived when I was younger, and we had to like get over it to basically avoid a 15-minute walk to somewhere. And, in my mind's eye, this creek was running like it was a lot of water, and it was deep, and we would like jump from logs to rocks and like, this whole thing. And I went back as an adult and I looked down there and I was like, is this even like a trickle? Like, what's going through here? But in my mind's eye, it was just a river that ran through there. So anyway, it's fun when you're little doing stuff like that. I'd rather run across the board too than the bridge, probably. My gosh. Well, you said earlier you were concerned about your other kids. Have you done TrialNet or anything like that to look into whether they have markers?
I get paranoid about them, and maybe I've never had anxiety before, but I think I have anxiety now. And so if I notice the kids drinking like an extra amount of water or something, or like one day I'm picking Connor up from basketball practice. No, it was actually football practice. And he's like, I was super thirsty today at practice. He goes, I drank more than usual. I was like, let me see the bottom of your feet and make sure his feet weren't dry and stuff like that. He's like, Mom. And so some of the signs, and I've got the TrialNet actually for both of my kids sitting at home, and I've had them sitting at home for about 6 months, and I can't bring myself to do it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. It's like, if I don't know, is that better than if I do know if they have it? I don't know what to do in that instance. I don't know what I want to do yet. So I have these kids sitting at home that I've done nothing with yet because I don't know what decision to make, I guess.
Oh, no, I think that's a fairly reasonable response. And you're only a year into it as well. So,
yeah. And then part of me is like, if the kids know what those tests are for, and if they ask for the results, and if I'm like, yeah, you tested negative for all the markers, but if I don't tell them, then they're going to know, be like, well, oh my gosh, I'm worrying I tested positive for markers and I don't want to lie. So, there's that other aspect, and maybe I'm overthinking the TrialNet and all of that. I have no idea.
Does sound like you're overthinking it a little bit, but I understand why I understand why you are. What I would say is if your kids have markers for type 1 diabetes, then they're going to get type 1 diabetes at some point, very likely.
Yes.
And that doesn't change anything, does it? What does it change?
No, I don't know, because on one hand, you worry about if your kid's going to end up with it or not. But yet on the other hand, if you know your kid's going to end up with it, maybe you worry a little bit more about when it's going to happen. I don't know.
Oh, you're
honestly,
worried.
I have no idea.
You're worried that the worry that would come with an actual confirmation would be worse than the worry you have worrying about what may or may not happen.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. And there's been times where, like, I'm telling you, I'm so paranoid with the other kids getting it that the other kids, like, they've started vomiting, or I think something's happening. I have taken my other kids' blood sugars.
Sure.
And there was, it's been crazy because, looking back on Zoe before her diagnosis, and honestly, probably at least a couple months before, I noticed she had been getting more more moody than what she normally is. She's normally not my moody child. And I was just attributing it to, a girl getting older, starting to go through puberty and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then I noticed her start drinking more. She has never been my kid to wet the bed. And there was a couple times where she wet the bed at night, and she is probably going to be so mad at me for saying that. But, and then I noticed I thought she just wasn't gaining weight. And I'm like, well, maybe she's just getting taller and stuff. And then there was, oh gosh, it was a few days before her actual DKA. She had come up to me and she goes, Mom, my feet are really dry. And I look and I'm like, they're starting to crack. I'm like, what the heck, and you still don't put two and two together at that point. Or maybe I just didn't, because I never thought, people who don't experience type 1 diabetes are very uneducated on the signs and symptoms, and just educated and uneducated in general of type 1 diabetes. And so just putting all of those together, you feel really, I feel the mom guilt very badly.
Oh, boy.
And
I mean, you did get her to the hospital and she was okay. Right? It's just like, how would you know to look for something like that? I don't know. I understand you feel that way. I would hope that in time you wouldn't anymore. So, I mean, I'm not trying to talk you out of the way you feel. I felt the same way you did. But it does go away if you let it, I guess is the point.
Yeah.
And Kayla, episode 156 is called Worry is a Waste of Imagination. Did you not hear that one?
No, I listened to your episode on mom guilt, but not that one. Maybe I need to listen to that one.
because the truth is, if there's something to worry about or not, just worrying about it without knowing it really is, you're just imagining something bad. It's not based on anything. At least if you're going to worry, let it be about something real. That
is true.
Yeah, because then maybe you've got a good chance that you won't have to worry about anything. And if you do have to worry, at least your worry will be targeted and maybe valuable. Like maybe you would go to T-Sealed and ask them about, that medication that stretches out the onset of type 1. Like maybe your kids would do that and put it off for a while. Like that would be pretty cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Don't get me wrong, but don't torture yourself. It's a short life. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'll get over the mom guilt eventually, but it's been about a year and a half since diagnosis. Maybe I should be over it already. I have no idea, but it's there. And I think the hardest part of her diagnosis, honestly, as far as getting everything up and going and not necessarily squared away, but just trying to adapt to our new lifestyle, essentially was school. Cause she wanted to go. I mean, she was right back in school that following Monday, and the only other type 1 diabetic in our school, she was in high school. She just graduated this year, and she was on an insulin pump. And I think she managed her diabetes differently than we managed my daughter. My daughter were more strict and things like that. Mm-hmm. So in the elementary, they really had no experience. And I'm not going to say names and go into the situation entirely, because I think if they heard this, certain administration would just go off the deep end. But but it was really rough in the beginning. There was one point I had someone so we changed Zoe's lunch ratios for lunch, and actually the endocrinologist did, because that was still the point where within a month of her diagnosis, where I was still going to the endo for guidance and stuff. After a month, I haven't asked the endo for guidance on any of her dosages after a month in of her diagnosis, because they played it too safe, I guess you could say. But I mean, I had one of the staff yelling at me, like, why are you changing this? And I mean, they're not educated in type 1 diabetes whatsoever. And I mean, yelling at me in front of Zoe. And I was like, how is this okay? And I finally got it to where, and then the whole texting diabetes thing, and see, the nurse, me and Zoe were all in it, and in this, and I had to fight to get that. I had to fight to get basically Zoe to be able to kind of self-manage at school and stuff, because they were not okay with it. And I finally had to just gather an email together to everybody involved and the superintendent and stuff. And I had to attach like a copy of the Missouri statute that says she has the right to dose and carry anywhere, anytime in a school setting. And I had to, there was even one point I had contacted the Children's Mercy social worker, and I explained everything that was going on to her. And she goes, honestly, she goes, if you have any further issues, she goes, I would take it farther up the line.
Yeah.
And she's like, I would contact the ADA and all of that. And so it got pretty hairy for a while, but ever since that email I sent them, I was professional in it and stuff. Ever since that email I sent them, things have been pretty good.
Good.
So we'll see how next year goes. But yeah, it was very, very rough in the beginning with the school, but
it was a big deal when Arden was younger. One of our outgoing governors signed this bill, like literally on like the last day, when they just, when they do all the stuff on the last day that they think wasn't going to be good for them getting reelected, but once they're done, they're just like, they zip through everything. So they made it okay for kids to give themselves insulin in New Jersey in their classroom. That was a long time ago already. But it was amazing how resistant they were. The school was like, no, it has to be in the nurse's office. And they talked to you about it like it was like there was like a real reason. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. And then that governor, he signed that bill, and then I found out about it, and I was like, Arden's going to give herself her insulin in her room now. And they were like, okay. It was just like that. Like, okay. So there was no real reason not to do it other than we were just doing what we were told. And like, oh, I gotcha.
And see, the reasons I was told why they didn't want her to carry her own supplies and not even her own emergency pen, and was, what if other kids get into her stuff?
Oh, I would say those kids should keep their hands off of shit that's not theirs.
That's exactly what I said.
Good.
And I had to fight to get, for Zoe to be able to text me for guidance and things like that. And I said, look, none of you are experiencing type 1 diabetes. I said, Zoe and I have it pretty fine-tuned to what works for her. I said, I'm not asking for you to allow Zoe to be on her phone to message Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's literally strictly for diabetes only. And then they had come back with, well, what if another student sees her on her phone? They're going to think they can get on theirs or have special treatment. I said, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I said, I don't care about the other kids. And I said, I know for a fact there's other kids in that classroom that get special treatment. I said, so you don't even go down that road with me.
I actually told a person one time, I said, you tell those kids if they'd like to get an incurable disease, they can have their phone too.
Yeah.
If they think it's worth all that, or otherwise, you be an adult and manage the situation. Like my daughter's going to be unwell or less well because you're worried that a kid in her class is going to look at Instagram and that's not something you can deal with. Like, try harder, Just, yeah. Well, actually, that reminds me one time when Arden was in middle school, she came home like very earnestly and she goes, Dad, at the end of the day today, we were having this conversation about something. And I'm like, right. And she goes, it was the end of the day. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, so I looked at Instagram on my phone. And she's like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, because we told her the phone is just for diabetes. And I was like, it's all right, Arden. I was like, it was the end of the day, right? And she goes, yeah. I said, don't worry about it. It's fine. She goes, but it was on their Wi-Fi. I'm like, it's okay. Don't
oh my gosh.
Don't worry about it. It's going to be all right. So she took it seriously. We told her, like, the phone is for this. It's not for that other stuff. And, the other kids are going to be complaining. And she said she heard it a couple of times. Like, well, it's not fair. And Arden was like, fair? Nothing about this is fair.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well, it sounds like you worked through it okay, though.
Yeah, we've worked through the school issues, I think, for the most part. It was really rough in the beginning, and I say I had a lot of issues with them and stuff, but I think we've ironed them out and whatnot. And I know one of their arguments about Zoe self-managing was she's a kid and they don't think she should have to take on that kind of responsibility. And I told them, I said, she is a kid, but she's a kid with type 1 diabetes. I said, and I'm like, it does suck. If I could take it from her, I would. I said, but this is her life now. This is our life. And if she doesn't learn how to manage it now, I said, I was like, I want her to manage it so she grows up to be healthy and doesn't have all these complications and things like that. I'm like, I can't help that you feel that she shouldn't have to have that responsibility. I'm like, that she does. I mean, point blank, I can't take it from her.
Right. Also, in a world where the truth is that really well, like, educated people only are able to about halfway give you good information when they're helping you with your diabetes. Like, no offense to anyone. It's a great job. And I think it's wonderful that people do it. But, somebody who's a nurse at a school is not prepared to take care of like diabetes beyond, that they're medical people and you can give them a checklist and they can follow it and everything, which is terrific. I mean, it's amazing. But if you're looking for them for like deeper understanding, it's likely not going to come from them. And now you're saying they're the end all be all. And I don't know how that goes,
And, I remember one of the comments that really got me the most would kind of reach that crescendo of me emailing and finally getting what I want, the texting diabetes, and then her being able to self-manage kind of anywhere, anytime, which I wasn't asking for anything. I don't feel like
crazy.
That was crazy,
Yeah.
Was I had got a phone call from one of the administration that said, I just, with the school nurse and everything, it's like, I think she just feels like, you're kind of taking that control away from her. I said, what control? She's my kid.
Yeah.
I'm like, I get you guys are legally responsible for why she's in school and stuff. I said, but I'm not asking to keep anybody out of the loop. I said, I'm not saying she can't go to you guys at all. I'm like, I literally just want to be able to manage this in the best way possible for her, so she doesn't have the higher blood sugars and things like that. And there's been so much other stuff with the school at the beginning, but way too much to get into. But yeah, I think it's all good now, and we've kind of reached that crescendo. And
yeah, you may have had a very similar situation that I did when Arden went into high school. And I sat in a little conference room, and the nurse was like, well, this isn't how we do it. And I was like, oh, that's something. I'm like, it's how we do it. So am I worried about you? I was like, this meeting. So is this meeting about how you feel? I'm like, we're not worried about you. It's fantastic.
And then, it got to the point where Zoe came home and she's like, I'm not comfortable making decisions at school on my own. And because I feel like I'm going to be judged for it. And I was like, well, great. I mean, I didn't really know how to respond to her at that point or handle that. But I mean, we finally talked it out.
She thought she'd be judged by the school and the nurses at the school?
She thought that she would make a decision that they thought was wrong and I guess essentially hold it against her or something. Oh, yeah. I don't know.
You should let her hang out with Arden for a couple hours. She wouldn't think like that anymore.
I've always told her, I'm like, look, if you end up giving yourself too much insulin, I said, you have sugar. If you end up giving yourself not enough insulin, I said, you have insulin to give. I'm like,
plus,
nothing's going to go wrong.
Episode 3 clearly says texting is, I still think, like, if you're parenting a child with diabetes, texting is the absolute unsung. Where did that word go? It got caught in my throat. Unsung. There we go. I'm not going to try to say it a fourth time because I got it the last time and I'm good with it. But it's technology that you can't ignore. It's very valuable. It takes away the waiting in between. It allows immediacy for treatment. It allows for a kid to say, hey, I'm not sure about this. Or for you to say, hey, what are you doing? And you can have a 30-second texting conversation that eliminates so many problems and really doesn't interfere with their day. And I think it's just the way to go, honestly. So.
Yep. And So I've listened to your episodes on that, and I listened to probably about every single episode I can find on people's issues with school and 504 and all of that. And I've kind of implemented all that from the Juicebox plus the research I've done with, like the ADA and, Missouri statutes. And I just threw all that at the school and I was like, here you go. I'm like, I am not asking for anything nobody has asked for before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I said so.
We're not doing anything crazy here. I mean, you've said it a couple times. We're not doing anything crazy here. Just try to think outside of the box for half a second. I hate that term because it sounds douchey, but just try to think outside of the box for 2 seconds here. And we have a thing. It's going to work. It's going to work so much better than the thing you want to do. And isn't her health, in general, not just her health, by the way, day to day, but her expectations for her health and her expectations for her autonomy and all those other things that you don't realize you're building as you're going. If you teach her, it's not on me, it's on somebody else. That's how she grows up thinking. And if you teach her, well, I'm busy at school today, so a 200 blood sugar is okay. Well, then that's how she's going to manage her health moving forward. Like that'd be a hard thing to break later as a bad habit. So,
Yep.
yeah.
And that's, what I told the school too. I said, I'm trying to create good, healthy habits now and her to manage it now.
Yeah.
I said, and honestly, she is my most strong-willed child. But she's done pretty fabulous with this. I mean,
Sounds terrific.
we don't let it hold us back, and we're about to go in a couple weeks on a river float down south for about 6 to 7 hours. And last summer we went to my uncle's cabin in the mountains. It's completely off the grid, no cell phone service or anything. We were up there for 3 days, and I mean, we don't let it hold us back, but I mean, we do have some things to work through still and stuff. I mean, I'm sure there's things that haven't come up yet in just the measly year and a half that we've been dealing with this, but
they'll come up. And then, but you apply this way of thinking to those things, and you'll be surprised how well they work out. Just common sense, put yourself and your health first. That really is the way to get to it, honestly. And this thing, we have to wrap up here in a second, but like the way plus you probably have to pay or go home or something, but
I'm still staring at I work at a agricultural equipment company, a John Deere dealership essentially. And so I've been sitting here staring at all of these combines for the last hour.
but you talked earlier about like you didn't think you were a person who had anxiety, but now you feel like that. And I don't know, like anxiety to me, I'm not discounting anyone's anxiety for certain, but it feels like a word that gets thrown around a lot lately. And, I mean, if there's something you're worried about, then I think you should try to eliminate that worry and see if that feeling doesn't change for you as well. I didn't want to get off without mentioning that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if there's a thing you're worried about, stop worrying about it. And I don't mean just like magically stop worrying about it, but find a way not to worry about it. Like prove it to yourself,
My husband's pretty much told me the same thing. It was like, what's going to happen is going to happen. And I think I'm most honestly worried about my other 2 kids getting it. And I know there's families out there with multiple type 1s, and I don't know how they do it.
Yeah.
But
they do it because that's what they got to do. And you would too if you had to. Yeah. Same thing. Yeah. Same way everybody does everything. Just get up in the morning and don't give up. That's pretty much it. Like you and I aren't married, so I could tell you just to calm the fuck down, but your husband can't say that. So, and if I went downstairs and said that to the lady downstairs, you wouldn't get the podcast anymore because I'd be dead. So, but here we are, and it's good advice.
Yeah.
And I could use that advice given to me sometimes too, by the way. I wasn't saying because you're a lady. Sometimes you just, you get a little wound up in something and it's hard to get away from. And then the one person you count on to help you is the one person who you push back on when they try to help you. It's life's weird. I don't want to get too deep.
Yeah, it is. And I probably do just need to calm down and stop worrying about, what could happen in the future. And I've never been that tight, but I mean, I'm working on it. Let's just say that.
Well, and I honestly, being serious, like you're aware of it. I think that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? You're not just you're not telling me like I'm upset. I don't know. It's not unfocused. Your response to it, you know what's happening. So anyway, I say, here's what I do. I'd give the kids the trial net thing. It's very likely going to come back that they don't have markers, and then you'll be okay. And if it comes back that it doesn't have markers, lie to them for a while. It's fine. You can do whatever you want. You're an adult. So,
that is true. I mean, as a parent, I guess we can't say that we've never lied to our kids.
And it's not really lying, is it? Like, I'm being serious. I know I brought this up earlier and I bummed everybody out, and I'm going to do it one more time. Okay. So people are going to hear this some 6 months after this happened. So try while you're listening not to feel bad, please. But my mom, if you've listened to this podcast, like my mom got cancer. She had a significant surgery that removed it. She did chemo and rehab for a year. She was pronounced cancer-free. She moved out to Wisconsin to live with my brother. And maybe about 6 months later, her cancer markers started to creep up again. And we, did exactly what we were supposed to do. But there's no doubt, going through chemo, slowed her down a little bit. So, her memory wasn't as good. She's tired a little more often, those sorts of things. And we could get her to the doctor and be like, oh, it's a heart doctor appointment, Mom. She'd be like, yeah, heart doctor appointment. And, and even if the doctor said right in front of her, it's not like she's listening with the same ear she was 30 years before that. So when we took her back and the markers went up, we asked the doctor, well, what are you going to do? And he goes, well, right now we can't do anything except check the markers again in 30 days. And they did. They went up again. So they gave her a CT scan and the scan came back clean. So there was nothing for us to really do in the moment. And anyway, we never told my mom that they were checking on her cancer. We never did. And for the last 6 months of her life, she got blood tests where they tracked the markers, and the CT scan that showed that my mom's cancer returned pretty significantly arrived a couple days after she had a stroke and just a day or two before she passed away. And I have to tell you, I'm not just happy that she didn't know, I'm proud that she didn't know. Like, I'm happy that my mom lived the last year of her life thinking she beat cancer and it never came back. And I'm not saying to lie to your kids for 20 years about they have markers for type 1, but if they do, then on your time, when you're able to articulate it well in a setting that is controlled, that is right for them, you'd be able to tell them that. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's not lying. It's just good management of relationships, I think. I don't know. I'm sure people disagree.
I think my son could handle the news, but I know my youngest 100% would not be able to handle it yet. There's around the time of her diagnosis, within that year or two, there was just so much death within the community. She's still right. She still worries over her sister's diabetes, and I just have to reassure her, like, everything is handled. I mean, she's
little. She's like 7, right?
So she's 8. She'll be 9 in August.
Yeah, listen, if I had your situation and my 8-year-old's numbers came back and she had, I don't know, a marker for type 1 diabetes, and they told me, look, it's possible that she could get it and it's possible she won't get it, I would not pull her aside and tell her that. I just wouldn't. Mm-hmm. I'd be like, all right, listen, we know now to pay attention a little more. I'm not going to burden a 9-year-old with this, an 8-year-old with this.
Right.
If it came back, she had 4 markers and they were like, look, she's going to get diabetes the next time she sneezes, then you know what I mean? Then I might start talking to her about it a little bit, and even not even talking directly right away, but just prepping her in ways that she might not even see coming. I don't know. There's a way to do it is what I'm saying. You could do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been talking to you for an hour. You're a bright lady. You'll figure it out. It's better than you wandering around worried all the time about something that probably isn't going to happen. Makes me upset. Plus, I imagine your husband not able to tell you.
Yeah. I can only imagine what goes through his head.
Oh, yeah. You don't have to imagine. We would tell you if you asked. Like, we're not smart enough to keep it to ourselves. So
the key is, do us women want the truth of what you guys are thinking or not?
I don't imagine you do. If you could hear inside of my head, Kayla, I still sound like I'm like 16 years old. Like, I swear to you, the other day, we're going to end here, right? I've been married for like 26 years. Like a really, really long time. And my wife comes upstairs and we're going to go out. Like, she's been working all day. And I guess if I'm being honest, she was wearing like a sports bra. And we're going to go out. So she comes up to put a real bra on. And she does it in my office while we're talking, but under her shirt. And all I could think was, would it kill her to take that off while she's putting that bra on? Like, why is she wearing the shirt while this is happening? Like, I was 15 is what I was thinking. I've seen my wife's boobs so many times, Kayla. And I swear to you, we're sitting there talking about where to go to dinner. And all I could think was, like, I wonder why she's like, why wouldn't she just take that shirt off to do that? Anyway, so we're thinking something along those lines, in case you're wondering. For all of you. Yeah.
Yep, my husband's the same way. We've actually, I'll be 34 July 2nd, but we've been together since I was 16. So it's been quite some time for us too. And there's moments where I'm like, does he have to, do that every time I do the dishes, or I think he just pushes the buttons on purpose. And I think you probably know what I'm talking about. And
oh my God. My wife came out of the shower one day and I could hear the little voice in my head go, "Ooh, boobies." I don't know what to tell you. It's how it works. I'm sorry. I could act like it doesn't. You could tell people like, "Oh, I listen to this guy. He's really good at diabetes. He seems really smart about." I swear to God, like I was like, "Oh, this is it. This is it." So I'm sorry. I apologize. I feel dumb saying it. I'm not going to lie to you, but it's the absolute truth. So
no, anyway. My husband's the same way. So
yeah. No, that's all.
I think it's, yeah.
Yeah. Don't ask us what we're thinking if that's not what you want to hear. I guess.
Yeah. I've learned that already, I think.
And by the way, the minute it's not like that, she'll be like, why aren't you interested in seeing this? And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I can't possibly win. So,
No, you guys can't.
I'm playing the game till she decides to smother me with a pillow. That's all. Which I'm assuming the decision's been made. She just doesn't have the nerve to do it yet. But it's one day. I fully expect that's how I go out.
You're expecting it right now. That's why she hasn't done it yet.
I guess I should record it here. If anybody hears I died in my sleep, call a cop. That's not what happened. It's not what happened, and it needs to be investigated. Okay? Thank you. All right, Kayla, you were delightful. I appreciate you doing this very much. Thank you. I really do appreciate you taking the time.
Yep, not a problem. Thank you.
Cool. Hold on one second. If you'd like to wear the same insulin pump that Arden does, all you have to do is go to omnipod.com/juicebox. That's it. Head over now and get started today, and you'll be wearing the same tubeless insulin pump that Arden has been wearing since she was 4 years old. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. If you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. But everybody is welcome. Type 1, Type 2, gestational, loved ones, it doesn't matter to me. If you're impacted by diabetes and you're looking for support, comfort, or community, check out Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.